My name is Abigail Mitchell, though everyone calls me Abby. At 28, I thought I had finally built a life for myself in Boston, away from my mother's constant comparisons to my perfect sister, Melody. But one dinner changed everything. There I was, at my sister's lavish birthday celebration, when my mother stood up, glass raised high, and announced to everyone, "She's the daughter I'm proud of." Then, as the night ended, she casually handed me the bill for $1,980. Before I dive into how everything unfolded that night, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living in a carefully curated world where appearances mattered above all else. Our family portrait might have looked perfect to outsiders: successful parents, two daughters with straight-A report cards, a beautiful colonial house in a respected neighborhood. But beneath that polished surface ran deep currents of favoritism that shaped my entire childhood. I was the practical one. As the oldest daughter, I approached life with a methodical mindset, excelling in school and following rules to the letter. I chose a stable career path in marketing, working my way up from intern to senior marketing specialist at one of Boston's most respected firms. My apartment isn't fancy, but it's mine, paid for with my own money, decorated with simple but tasteful furniture, and always meticulously clean. I've built my life around reliability and independence. My sister Melody, on the other hand, is the dreamer. 3 years younger than me, she floats through life on charisma and spontaneity. With her perfect smile and effortless style, she decided to pursue fashion design after changing majors 4 times in college. She lives in a tiny but trendy apartment that our mother helps subsidize, creating colorful clothing designs and chasing her big break in the industry. Everyone who meets Melody falls instantly in love with her vibrant energy. Then there's our mother, Catherine Mitchell. A former beauty queen who transitioned into a successful real estate career, Mom has always been obsessed with image. Her hair is never out of place, her clothes always designer brands, and her social media presence carefully cultivated to showcase the perfect family. She chairs charity committees, hosts elaborate dinner parties, and never misses an opportunity to mention Melody's latest creative endeavor. My father, Robert, was different. A quiet accountant who preferred books to social gatherings, Dad was the one who noticed me. He attended my debate competitions and science fairs, quietly proud of my academic achievements even when Mom was too busy with Melody's dance recitals to show up. When I was 18, Dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack. I lost not only my father, but my sole cheerleader in the family. The pattern of favoritism was established early. When I won the regional spelling bee in 5th grade, Mom couldn't attend because Melody had a cold and needed attention. When I was accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship, Mom's reaction was lukewarm at best, but when Melody got into a less prestigious art school a few years later, Mom threw a lavish party and posted about it for weeks. "Your sister is special," Mom would say whenever I questioned the uneven treatment. "She needs more support to nurture her creative spirit." "You're so self-sufficient, Abigail." Being called self-sufficient became a backhanded compliment that really meant, "We don't need to celebrate your achievements." The dynamic between Melody and me was complicated. We loved each other, we were sisters, after all, but there was always an undercurrent of competition manufactured by our mother's obvious preference. Melody didn't ask for the favoritism, but she didn't reject it either. Why would she? From her perspective, she was simply receiving the love and support any daughter would want. After college, I deliberately built a life separate from my family's influence. I worked extra hours to avoid needing financial help. I chose friends who valued reliability and honesty over appearances. I dated men who had nothing to prove and no interest in family status. My independence became both my shield and my prison. I was free from my mother's direct control, but still chained to the need to prove my worth. Meanwhile, Melody's artistic path had the luxury of parental support. When she couldn't make rent, Mom stepped in. When she needed connections in the fashion industry, Mom leveraged her real estate clients to make introductions. When she failed, it was seen as a valuable learning experience. When I faced setbacks, they were framed as poor planning on my part. Despite these differences, I tried to maintain a relationship with my sister. We'd meet for coffee every few weeks, carefully avoiding discussions about mom or money. I genuinely celebrated when Melody's clothing designs were featured in a small local fashion show last month. I posted congratulations on social media, sent flowers to her apartment, and called to tell her how proud I was. Her success wasn't the problem, the uneven playing field was. Just last week, I'd received a significant promotion at work, becoming the youngest team leader in my company's marketing department. When I called Mom to share the news, she listened politely for 30 seconds before changing the subject to Melody's upcoming birthday celebration. "That's nice, dear," she said about my career milestone. Now, about Melody's dinner. That conversation should have prepared me for what was coming, but sometimes we see only what we want to see in the people we're desperate to please. The invitation came through a group text 3 weeks before Melody's 25th birthday. Mom had created a new group chat titled Melody's Special Day. That included me, Melody, and about 15 other people, mostly Mom's country club friends and Melody's artsy social circle. "Join us to celebrate our beautiful Melody's 25th birthday at Rochambeau," the text announced, complete with champagne bottle emojis. Saturday, 7 p.m. "Gifts welcome, but your presence is the real present." I stared at my phone, immediately calculating the impact on my budget. Rochambeau wasn't just any restaurant, it was one of the most expensive French establishments in Boston, where appetizers alone cost more than what I typically spent on an entire meal. My rent was due the following week, and I had just paid for my car's annual insurance premium. This wasn't the first time an expensive family gathering had been planned without discussing costs. Last Christmas, Mom had organized a holiday dinner at an upscale steakhouse, and I'd been surprised with my share of the bill, which somehow included wine I hadn't drunk and appetizers I hadn't ordered. When I questioned it, Mom had smiled tightly and said, "Family celebrations aren't the time to be stingy, Abigail." I set my phone down and stared out my apartment window. Part of me wanted to make an excuse, a work emergency, perhaps, or a sudden illness. But another part, the hopeful daughter who still craved maternal approval, whispered that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time Mom would notice my efforts to be a supportive sister. Maybe this time I would be enough. Later that evening, I called my best friend Jessica to talk through my options. "You know exactly how this will go," Jessica said after listening to me debate attending. "Catherine will make backhanded comments about your clothes, compare you to Melody, and probably stick you with part of the bill." "She's still my mother," I replied, feeling the familiar pull of obligation. "And Melody is still my sister." "Just set a budget beforehand," Jessica advised. "Decide what you can afford to spend and stick to it, no matter what Catherine says." Armed with Jessica's practical advice, I decided to attend the dinner, but prepared myself financially and emotionally. I withdrew $200 in cash, my absolute maximum budget for the evening, and resolved to politely but firmly stick to that limit. For Melody's gift, I wanted something thoughtful rather than expensive. After considerable thought, I found a beautiful handmade leather journal at a local artisan shop, its cover embossed with intricate designs that matched Melody's aesthetic. I paired it with a set of professional sketching pencils for her fashion designs, things I knew would be useful for her work. The combined gift cost $75, nearly a quarter of my discretionary budget for the month, but I wanted to give her something meaningful. As the day approached, I obsessed over what to wear. Nothing in my practical wardrobe seemed right for Rochambeau's elegant setting or would meet my mother's exacting standards. After trying on and rejecting every outfit I owned, I finally settled on a simple black dress that I'd worn to a company event last year. It wasn't new or designer, but it was classic and appropriate. I could already hear my mother's voice, "That old thing again, Abigail," but I pushed the thought away. The morning of the dinner, I spent extra time on my appearance, applying makeup more carefully than usual and styling my hair in loose waves rather than my typical practical ponytail. I wrapped Melody's gift in silver paper with a handwritten card expressing genuine wishes for her happiness in the coming year. Despite everything, I did love my sister and wanted her to know that. At 6:30 p.m., I pulled up to the valet parking outside Rochambeau, wincing at the additional expense, but knowing that finding street parking would make me late, a sin worse than being underdressed in my mother's eyes. As I handed my keys to the attendant, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the boundaries I'd set. $200. No more. I would be pleasant but firm. The restaurant's interior was even more opulent than I'd anticipated. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and plush velvet booths lined the walls. A massive arrangement of fresh flowers dominated the entrance, and servers in crisp white shirts moved efficiently between tables. I gave Melody's name to the hostess, who smiled knowingly. Yes, the Mitchell party. They've taken over our private dining room tonight. Right this way. Private dining room? My anxiety spiked as I followed her through the main restaurant area and through double doors into a separate space that had been elaborately decorated. Silver and gold balloons floated from every corner. A table groaning with wrapped gifts stood near a window overlooking the Charles River. A photographer was adjusting lighting equipment in the corner. I had severely underestimated what this evening would entail. The private dining room buzzed with conversation and laughter when I entered. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and the long table was already half-filled with guests sipping champagne. My mother stood near the head of the table, resplendent in a new designer dress I recognized from her recent social media posts, a Valentino that likely cost more than 3 months of my rent. Before I could even set down my small gift on the already overflowing table, Melody made her entrance. The room instantly erupted in cheers and applause. My sister floated in wearing a stunning blue dress that complemented her perfectly styled blonde hair and professionally applied makeup. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, and the room's energy shifted entirely toward her magnetic presence. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," our mother exclaimed, rushing to embrace Melody with the kind of unrestrained affection she had never shown me. Photographers, there were apparently 2 of them, began snapping pictures of the mother-daughter embrace. I stood awkwardly to the side, clutching my silver-wrapped package and waiting for someone to notice me. When Melody finally saw me, her smile seemed genuine. "Abby, you made it." She broke away from our mother to give me a quick hug. "Thanks for coming." "Happy birthday," I said, handing her my gift. "I hope you like it." Before Melody could respond, our mother swooped in, her critical gaze sweeping over my appearance. "Abigail, darling, didn't you get my text about the color scheme tonight? We're doing blues and silvers." She gestured to my black dress with poorly disguised disappointment. "And your hair looks a bit flat. Did you not have time to get it done?" "I styled it myself," I answered, feeling my confidence deflate. "And no, I didn't see anything about a color scheme in the invitation." Mom waved dismissively. "Well, you're here now. We've seated you over there." She pointed to the far end of the table, where a single-place card sat separate from the main cluster of guests. As I made my way to my assigned seat, Melody was already being introduced to the other guests by our mother. "Everyone, this is Bradley," Mom announced, presenting a tall, handsome man in an expensive suit. "Melody's new boyfriend. He's an investment banker with Hamilton Partners." Bradley's firm handshake and confident smile screamed old money and privilege. He kept his arm possessively around Melody's waist as they circulated through the room. I recognized several of my mother's friends from the country club, all dressed impeccably and carrying gifts in designer shopping bags. The other half of the guest list consisted of Melody's artistic friends, photographers, designers, and gallery owners who were somehow both bohemian and wealthy at the same time. No one from my life was present. Not my colleagues, not my friends, not even distant relatives who might have provided a buffer between me and my mother's social circle. I settled into my seat at the far end of the table, practically separated from the main group. From this vantage point, I could observe the entire room but wasn't really part of it, a metaphor for my position in the family that wasn't lost on me. A server appeared instantly at my mother's finger snap, and she ordered without consulting anyone else. "We'll start with the 2008 Dom Perignon for everyone, and the seafood tower for the table. And the truffle canapés, of course." My stomach tightened. The champagne alone would be hundreds of dollars. I reached for the water glass in front of me, wishing it contained something stronger. Small talk swirled around me as I sat quietly observing. Bradley was regaling the table with stories of his recent business trip to Singapore. Melody's artist friends were discussing an upcoming gallery opening. My mother's country club crowd was exchanging gossip about people I didn't know. Occasionally, someone would glance in my direction with a polite smile before returning to their conversation. I made several attempts to join discussions. When I mentioned my recent promotion at work, my mother quickly redirected the conversation to Melody's fashion show success. When I tried to connect with one of Melody's friends about a mutual interest in photography, my mother interrupted to show everyone new pictures of Melody's designs on her phone. The pattern was familiar, but no less painful for its predictability. The champagne arrived with much fanfare, and my mother proposed the first of many toasts to Melody. To my beautiful daughter on her 20th birthday, your creativity and spirit bring light to everyone around you. Everyone clinked glasses enthusiastically. No one seemed to notice I hadn't been given a personal toast at my last birthday dinner, a much simpler affair at a casual restaurant where I'd ended up paying for everyone's meals. The food began arriving in waves, expensive delicacies I barely tasted as I calculated their probable cost in my head. Seafood towers with lobster and king crab. Foie gras with truffle shavings. Caviar served on mother-of-pearl spoons. Each new dish was met with exclamations of delight from the guests and proud smiles from my mother, who kept ordering more without checking the prices. After the appetizers, it was time for Melody to open her gifts. I watched as she unwrapped present after present of expensive luxury items. A Gucci handbag from our mother. A weekend spa retreat from her friends. Designer clothes, jewelry, and even a promise of a week at someone's vacation home in the Hamptons. When she opened my gift, the handmade journal and professional sketching pencils, her reaction was polite but underwhelming after the extravagance that had preceded it. "Thanks, Abby," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This will be useful for my sketches." "It's handmade by a local artist," I explained, feeling the need to justify my gift. "The leather is supposed to develop a beautiful patina over time." "How practical," my mother commented with a thin smile, already reaching for the next gift to hand to Melody. "Just like you, Abigail." Throughout the gift opening, my mother positioned herself and Melody for countless photographs, directing them like a professional shoot. "Melody, turn slightly to the right, that's your best angle. Hold the gift higher. Smile bigger." She examined each photo immediately after it was taken, deleting any that didn't meet her standards. I noticed I wasn't asked to be in any of the photos. When I did appear in the background of group shots, my mother would later crop me out before posting them on social media, a digital erasure that mirrored my position in the family. As the main courses arrived, Wagyu beef, butter-poached lobster, and other delicacies I couldn't afford on my own, Bradley began questioning me about my career. "Marketing, huh?" he said, swirling expensive wine in his glass. "That's a tough field to really make it in. Have you considered getting an MBA to be more competitive?" Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Abigail has always been content with the practical path. Not everyone has Melody's drive for excellence and creativity." The conversation continued around me, each exchange reinforcing my outsider status in what was supposedly my own family. As servers continued bringing unordered items to the table, special vintage wines, off-menu delicacies that the chef had specially prepared for our party, I grew increasingly anxious about the mounting bill. When I quietly asked my mother about the costs during a brief moment alone, she waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it, Abigail. We'll figure it out later. This is Melody's special day. Let's not get bogged down in penny pinching." Her dismissal stung, but years of conditioning had taught me to swallow my concerns rather than make a scene. I retreated back to my seat at the edge of the celebration, watching as my sister continued to bask in the spotlight that had always eluded me. After the decadent main courses had been cleared away, the servers brought out an elaborate 3-tier birthday cake, custom designed to match the color scheme of the party. Tiny sugar flowers cascaded down one side, and "Happy 25th Birthday Melody" was written in perfect gold script across the middle tier. The cake alone must have cost hundreds of dollars. My mother stood up, tapping her crystal glass with a silver spoon to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. She was in her element now, the center of attention at a social gathering she had orchestrated to perfection. "I'd like to make a toast to my beautiful daughter on this special birthday," she began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone used to public speaking. "Melody, watching you grow into the amazing woman you are today has been the greatest joy of my life." I took a sip of water, preparing myself for the usual effusive praise of my sister. This was familiar territory, uncomfortable but expected. "From the moment you were born, you've had that special quality that draws people to you. Your creativity, your passion, your ability to light up any room, these gifts make you truly extraordinary." The guests nodded and smiled. Melody beamed under the praise, looking genuinely touched by our mother's words. As a mother, nothing makes me prouder than seeing my daughter follow her dreams with such determination and talent. "The way you've pursued your fashion career, never giving up despite challenges, shows the kind of character I always hoped to instill in my children." My throat tightened. There was no acknowledgement that she had two daughters, both with achievements worth celebrating. Then came the words that cut deeper than any before. "When people ask me about my family," Mom continued, her voice thick with emotion as she looked directly at Melody, "I tell them about you with such pride. You truly are the daughter I'm proud of, the one who reflects everything I value in this world." The room erupted in applause. Glasses clinked. Melody wiped away a tear of joy. And I sat frozen, the words echoing in my mind. The daughter I'm proud of. Not one of the daughters. The daughter. As if there were no other. As if I didn't exist at all. In that moment, I felt physically invisible. The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. The conversation and laughter around me faded to a distant buzz as I struggled to maintain my composure. 28 years of seeking approval, of trying to be good enough, crystallized into a single, undeniable truth: I would never be the daughter my mother wanted. Memories flashed through my mind, all the times I'd been passed over, forgotten, or measured against Melody and found wanting. The school plays my mother had missed while attending Melody's dance recitals. The graduation where she'd complained about the length of the ceremony rather than celebrating my academic honors. The countless family photos where she'd positioned Melody in the center and me at the edge, as if preparing for the day she might crop me out entirely. I became aware of Jessica texting me under the table. "You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." My best friend, knowing my family dynamics, had recognized the impact of my mother's words even from across the room. I texted back a single word: later. Around me, the celebration continued unabated. Melody was cutting her elaborate cake, and servers were bringing yet more expensive additions to the table: special dessert wines, handcrafted chocolates, and other indulgences that no one had specifically ordered. "We must try the Chateau d'Yquem with the cake," my mother announced to the table. "It's Melody's favorite dessert wine." It wasn't actually Melody's favorite. My sister preferred Prosecco to most wines, but contradicting our mother wasn't worth the inevitable tension. I watched as the sommelier poured tiny glasses of the amber liquid, mentally adding another few $100s to the growing bill. I forced myself to take small bites of the cake placed before me, though it tasted like cardboard in my mouth. My mother continued orchestrating the evening, making sure Melody was always at the center of attention, always photographed from her best angle, always portrayed as the golden child she had always been. As coffee and digestives were served, Bradley began talking loudly about investment opportunities and the importance of strategic career moves. His attention turned to me again. "So, Abby, marketing is mostly just making ads, right? Like Mad Men, but with less smoking." He laughed at his own joke. "Actually, my team develops comprehensive brand strategies and multi-channel campaigns for major national clients," I replied evenly. "We're currently leading a complete digital transformation for—" "Abigail has always been good with details and organization," my mother interrupted, her tone suggesting these were somehow lesser qualities. "Melody, tell everyone about that designer who wants to feature your work in their next collection." The dismissal was so blatant that even some of the other guests looked uncomfortable. One of Melody's friends, a photographer named Rachel, actually tried to redirect the conversation back to me. I'd be interested to hear more about your work, Abby. Marketing strategy is fascinating. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in again. Let's not bore everyone with business talk. Bradley, tell us more about that amazing vacation home your family has in Nantucket. Something in me snapped. After years of swallowing my feelings to keep the peace, I found myself speaking up. Actually, I'd like to finish what I was saying. My career isn't just details and organization. I was recently promoted to team leader, the youngest in the company's history. A brief, uncomfortable silence fell over our end of the table. My mother's smile tightened dangerously. Abigail, darling, this isn't really the time to discuss work. We're celebrating Melody tonight. I understand that, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. But Bradley asked about my career, and I was answering him. And now we're moving on, my mother said with finality, her tone carrying a warning. Melody, sweetheart, we haven't heard about your plans for the fall collection. As Melody began describing her designs, I felt a flush of humiliation creep up my neck. Once again, I had been put firmly in my place, the practical, forgettable daughter whose achievements didn't merit discussion, even when directly asked about them. The dessert portion of the evening continued with more toasts, more speeches, more praise for Melody's talent and potential. Each word felt like another brick in the wall that had always separated me from my mother's approval. By the time the final dessert plates were cleared away, my emotional reserves were completely depleted. I had retreated into a defensive silence, responding to direct questions with minimal politeness, but otherwise remaining invisible, a state that seemed to satisfy my mother perfectly. The evening was finally winding down. Guests began saying their goodbyes, collecting purses and coats, thanking my mother for the absolutely divine celebration. I watched the room gradually empty, relief washing over me at the thought that this ordeal was nearly over. If only I had known what was coming next. As the last few guests departed with air kisses and promises to do lunch soon, only 4 of us remained in the private dining room: my mother, Melody, Bradley, and me. The servers had discreetly begun clearing the elaborate decorations while the manager approached our table with a leather folder in hand. Mrs. Mitchell, it has been our pleasure to host this beautiful celebration, he said smoothly, placing the folder in front of my mother. Everything was to your satisfaction, I hope? Absolutely wonderful, my mother replied with her practiced social smile. The service was impeccable as always. The manager nodded and withdrew as my mother casually opened the folder. I watched her scan the bill without any change in her composed expression. Whatever the total was, and I knew it had to be astronomical, she showed no reaction to it. Then, with a movement so smooth it must have been planned in advance, she slid the leather folder across the table to me. Abigail, be a dear and take care of this, she said, her tone making it a statement rather than a request. You're the one with the real job, after all. I stared at her in disbelief before cautiously pulling the folder toward me and opening it. The number at the bottom of the bill hit me like a physical blow. $1,980.42. Nearly $2,000. For one dinner. The equivalent of my monthly rent plus utilities. What? I stammered, looking up at my mother in shock. You expect me to pay the entire bill? Well, your sister is still establishing her career, my mother replied as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. And I covered the deposit and decorations. It's only fair that you contribute, since you have a stable income. Melody looked slightly uncomfortable, but said nothing to contradict our mother. Bradley studied his expensive watch with sudden interest, clearly wanting no part in this family dynamic. But I had no idea this was the expectation, I said, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. You ordered champagne I didn't drink, food I didn't request, wines that cost hundreds of dollars per bottle. How is it fair to expect me to cover all of that? My mother's expression hardened. Abigail, you've always been the responsible one. It's what you're good at. Your sister is still building her career and needs financial flexibility for her creative pursuits. I did a quick mental calculation of my bank account balance. My rent was due in a week. I had just paid my car insurance premium. This bill would completely wipe out my carefully built emergency fund and still leave me short for my regular expenses. I can't afford this, I said simply. I brought $200 with me tonight, which is what I budgeted for this event. I had no idea you were planning to hand me the entire bill. Don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. Put it on your credit card. You're always so good with money, surely you have the credit available. It suddenly dawned on me that this hadn't been a spontaneous decision. She had planned this all along, invited me to a dinner I couldn't afford, allowed costs to escalate throughout the evening, then expected me to foot the bill without complaint because I was the responsible one. For the first time, I saw the pattern with perfect clarity. My responsibility wasn't a virtue in my mother's eyes, it was a utility to be exploited. My stability wasn't something to be proud of, it was a resource to be tapped for Melody's benefit. I thought back to all the previous family expenses that had somehow become my responsibility. The Christmas dinner where I'd paid for everyone's meals. The Mother's Day spa package that had mysteriously appeared on my credit card. The family vacation where I'd covered Melody's airfare because she was between payments from her design clients. This isn't the first time, I said quietly, the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. You've been doing this for years, setting up situations where I end up paying for things that benefit everyone but me. Don't be ridiculous, my mother snapped, her pleasant social mask slipping. This is what family does. We support each other. Your sister would do the same for you if the situations were reversed. But the situations were never reversed. Melody was never expected to support me. She was the one who needed supporting, always and forever. I'll pay for my portion, I said firmly, taking the $200 from my purse and placing it on the table. That should cover my meal, my drinks, and a portion of the shared appetizers, plus a generous tip. My mother's face flushed with anger. That is completely unacceptable. After everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done for me lately, Mom? The question escaped before I could censor it, years of suppressed feelings finally breaking through. When was the last time you celebrated my accomplishments? When was the last time you introduced me with pride rather than as an afterthought? When was the last time you made me feel valued in this family? Melody shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Abby, maybe we should discuss this another time. There's nothing to discuss, my mother cut in sharply. Abigail is simply being selfish. After I paid for your college, after I helped you get your first apartment. You paid for one semester of my college before telling me the money had to go to Melody's art school tuition instead. I corrected her. I worked 2 jobs and took out student loans for the rest. And you didn't help with my first apartment, Dad did, before he died. You've consistently rewritten history to minimize what you've done for me while exaggerating what you've done for Melody. Bradley cleared his throat awkwardly. I could help with the bill if that would. Absolutely not, my mother interrupted. This is a family matter. The restaurant staff were now visibly uncomfortable, pretending to arrange things on the far side of the room while obviously overhearing every word. Here's what's going to happen, I said, summoning a calm I didn't know I possessed. I'm leaving $200. That's what I can afford, and it's a fair contribution for what I personally consumed tonight. If you want Bradley to contribute, or if you want to pay the rest yourself, that's between you. But I will not be manipulated into financial hardship because you decided to throw an extravagant party without consulting the person you expected to pay for it. My mother's expression shifted from anger to the emotional manipulation I'd seen all my life. After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? By embarrassing me in public and refusing to help your sister celebrate her special day. For the first time, I recognized the tactic for what it was and refused to take the bait. I came to celebrate Melody. I brought a thoughtful gift. I've been polite all evening despite being seated at the far end of the table and consistently interrupted or dismissed. I've done nothing to embarrass you, unless you count refusing to go into debt for a party I had no say in planning. The tension in the room was palpable. Melody looked torn between her natural alliance with our mother and some dawning recognition of the unfairness of the situation. Bradley continued to study his watch as if it held the secrets of the universe. My mother made one final attempt to reassert control. If you walk out now, Abigail, you're making a statement about your place in this family. Think very carefully about that decision. The implied threat hung in the air between us. For years, the fear of being cut off emotionally from my family had kept me compliant. But in that moment, I realized something vital. I was already cut off. I had never been truly included, never been valued for who I actually was. I had been tolerated as long as I was useful, particularly financially useful. I think my place in this family was made clear earlier tonight, I said, rising from my seat with as much dignity as I could muster. You've already told everyone who the daughter you're proud of is, and it isn't me. It never has been. I gathered my purse and jacket, placed the $200 on top of the bill, and looked at my sister. Happy birthday, Melody. I hope your year is wonderful. Then I walked out of the restaurant, each step feeling both terrifying and liberating. Behind me, I could hear my mother's indignant voice rising, but for once, I didn't turn back. I didn't apologize. I didn't capitulate. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, and I took my first full breath in hours. My hands were shaking as I retrieved my car from the valet, but something else was happening too. A strange, unfamiliar feeling was spreading through my chest. It took me several blocks to recognize it: freedom. The drive home from Rochambeau was a blur of streetlights and churning emotions. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I realized I was holding my breath every few minutes before forcing myself to exhale. The magnitude of what had just happened, of what I had just done, was still sinking in. I had stood up to my mother. After 28 years of trying to earn her approval, of swallowing my feelings to keep the peace, of accepting the role of responsible yet invisible daughter, I had finally said no. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my purse on the passenger seat. I ignored it, focusing on the road ahead and the strange mixture of anxiety and exhilaration coursing through my system. Whatever messages were coming through, angry texts from my mother, confused questions from Melody, perhaps even concerned check-ins from Jessica, who had witnessed part of the evening's events, they could wait until I was safely home. By the time I pulled into my apartment building's parking lot, my hands had stopped shaking. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering strength for whatever awaited me on my phone. Finally, I picked it up and scrolled through the notifications. 6 missed calls from Mom. 3 missed calls from Melody. 1 missed call from Jessica. 12 text messages. Mom, 8:42 p.m. I cannot believe your behavior tonight. Call me immediately. Mom, 8:47 p.m. You've embarrassed me in front of Bradley. Is that what you wanted? Mom, 8:52 p.m. This selfish streak of yours has gone too far, Abigail. Mom, 9:01 p.m. Your sister is in tears. I hope you're satisfied. Melody, 9:05 p.m. Abby, what happened? Mom is freaking out. Mom, 9:10 p.m. I've covered your portion of the bill, but this will not be forgotten. Melody, 9:12 p.m. Can we talk? This is getting out of hand. Mom, 9:18 p.m. I've always taught you girls that family comes first. Clearly that lesson didn't take with you. Jessica, 9:20 p.m. Hey, saw you leave. You okay? Call me when you can. Mom, 9:25 p.m. Your father would be so disappointed in you right now. That last text, invoking my father's memory as a weapon, sent a fresh surge of anger through me. Dad had been my ally, the one person in the family who saw me clearly and valued me for who I was. Using his memory to manipulate me felt like the ultimate betrayal. I called Jessica first, needing a friendly voice before facing anything else. Holy shit, Abby, she answered immediately. What happened after I left? Your mom looked like she was going to explode. She tried to stick me with a $2,000 dinner bill, I said, the absurdity of it almost making me laugh despite everything. Just handed it to me and expected me to pay it without question. $2,000? For one dinner? That's insane. I know. And when I refused, when I offered to pay just my portion, she acted like I was betraying the family. Like I was selfish for not wanting to empty my bank account for Melody's birthday. What did you do? Jessica asked, her voice a mixture of concern and pride. I left $200 and walked out, I said, still not quite believing I had done it. I just left. After she made that speech about Melody being the daughter she's proud of, something in me just snapped. Good for you, Jessica said firmly. It's about damn time. Your mom has been taking advantage of you for years, and that comment was completely out of line. We talked for nearly an hour, Jessica's unwavering support helping to strengthen my resolve. By the time we hung up, I felt steady enough to respond to Melody's texts, though I decided to ignore my mother's for the night. Me, 10:45 p.m., I'm okay. We can talk tomorrow. Not tonight. Melody responded almost instantly. Melody, 10:46 p.m., Mom says you refused to pay the bill and stormed out. Me, 10:48 p.m., I paid for my portion. I can't afford $1,980 for one dinner. Mom never discussed this with me beforehand. Melody, 10:50 p.m., Bradley ended up paying most of it. It was really awkward. I felt a flash of vindication at that. Good. Let Bradley see exactly what kind of family dynamic he was getting involved with. Let my mother feel the awkwardness of having her manipulation exposed. Me, 10:52 p.m., I'm sorry it was awkward, but I'm not sorry I stood up for myself. We can talk tomorrow, but I need space tonight. Melody, 10:53 p.m., okay. Call me when you're ready. I turned off my phone completely after that, needing a break from the digital onslaught. In my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, changed into comfortable pajamas, and made a cup of tea. The familiar routine helped ground me as my mind continued to process the evening's events. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity how my role in the family had been constructed. I wasn't just the responsible one, I was the convenient one, the useful one, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice without complaint. My practical nature wasn't respected, it was exploited. My financial stability wasn't celebrated, it was treated as a family resource to be tapped whenever Melody or my mother needed it. And, perhaps most painfully, I realized that no achievement of mine would ever be enough to earn the kind of love and pride my mother gave Melody freely. That wasn't a reflection of my worth, it was a reflection of my mother's limitations. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and a strange sense of lightness. I had slept better than I had in years, as if some long-carried burden had been set down. I made coffee and turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the next round of family drama. 27 new text messages and 9 missed calls. Most from my mother, a few from Melody, and one from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Bradley. I scrolled through them quickly, noting the progression from anger to threats to guilt-tripping in my mother's texts. Mom, 7:15 a.m., we need to discuss your behavior. Call me before you go to work. Mom, 7:40 a.m., your silence is very immature, Abigail. Mom, 8:02 a.m., I've always supported both my daughters equally. Your accusations are hurtful and untrue. Mom, 8:17 a.m., if you can't be bothered to participate in family celebrations properly, perhaps you shouldn't be invited to them at all. The last one was clearly meant to hurt me, to make me come crawling back with apologies. In the past, it would have worked. The threat of exclusion, of being even more peripheral to my already distant family, would have sent me into a panic of people-pleasing. Today, it just confirmed that I had made the right decision. Rather than responding to the texts, I decided to get ready for work. I had an important presentation that afternoon, and I wasn't going to let family drama derail my professional responsibilities. I showered, dressed in my favorite work outfit, and was just about to leave when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Melody standing in the hallway, looking tired and uncertain. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let her enter. She looked around my apartment as if seeing it for the first time, though she had visited several times before. "I like what you've done with the place," she said awkwardly. "It's very you." "Thanks," I replied, unsure where this was going. "I have to leave for work soon, so." "I know, I'll be quick." Melody sat on the edge of my sofa, fidgeting with the strap of her designer purse, another gift from our mother, no doubt. "Last night was a mess." I waited, not offering the automatic agreement or apology that would have once been my reflex response. "Mom shouldn't have sprung that bill on you," Melody continued, surprising me. "That wasn't fair." And what she said during the toast. She trailed off, looking genuinely uncomfortable. I didn't know she was going to say that. "Would it have changed anything if you had known?" I asked, not unkindly but directly. Melody looked down at her hands. "I don't know. I've never been good at standing up to Mom. Not like you were last night." I almost laughed at the irony. "Melody, last night was the first time in 28 years I've truly stood up to her. And it only happened because she pushed me to my absolute limit." I know Mom favors me, Melody said quietly. I've always known. But it was easier to just accept it than to challenge it. Does that make me a terrible person? The question caught me off guard. In all our years of dancing around the elephant in the room, neither of us had ever acknowledged it so plainly. No, I said after a moment's thought. It doesn't make you terrible. It makes you human. Who doesn't want to be loved and praised by their mother? But her favoritism has affected our relationship with each other. It's created a dynamic where we can never just be sisters without her influence hovering over us. Melody nodded slowly. What do we do now? I don't know about you, but I'm setting some boundaries, I said, feeling stronger as I put words to the decision I'd made overnight. I'll no longer participate in family events where I'm expected to pay without prior agreement. I won't sit silently while Mom belittles my career or my choices. And I won't compete for approval that's never coming. Do you think Mom will accept that? Probably not at first, I admitted. But that's not really my problem anymore. I can't control how she reacts. I can only control my own boundaries. Melody looked thoughtful. I think I need to do some boundary setting too. Last night after you left, Mom started planning this elaborate weekend trip for my birthday, talking about how we'd make up for the dinner disaster. But the way she talked about you. She shook her head. It didn't feel right. We talked for a few more minutes before I had to leave for work. As imperfect as the conversation had been, it felt like the first honest exchange we'd had as adults, the first time we'd acknowledged the dysfunctional dynamic that had shaped our relationship for decades. I'd like us to try being real sisters, I said as Melody prepared to leave. Without Mom as the go-between or the scorekeeper. Just us, getting to know each other as the adults we actually are, not the roles we've been assigned. Melody nodded, looking both scared and hopeful. I'd like that too. As I drove to work, I realized that whatever happened next with my mother, something fundamental had shifted. I had found my voice and I wasn't going to lose it again. 1 week after the disastrous birthday dinner, the dust was still settling. My mother had moved from angry messages to pointed silence, her way of punishing me for my betrayal. Various relatives had called, having received my mother's version of events. Abigail had a tantrum and embarrassed the family, refusing to participate in her sister's birthday celebration properly. I held firm to my new boundaries, politely but clearly explaining my side of the story to anyone who asked. Most were surprised to hear about the $1,980 bill that had been unexpectedly thrust upon me. A few even expressed admiration for my standing my ground, though always in hushed tones as if my mother might somehow overhear. Melody and I had texted a few times, cautiously navigating our new dynamic. She was caught in the middle, torn between her instinct to side with our mother, as she always had, and her growing recognition of the unfairness I had endured for years. Then, on a rainy Saturday afternoon, there was another knock at my door. I opened it to find Melody again, this time clutching a paper bag from my favorite bakery and looking determined. I brought peace offerings, she said, holding up the bag. Those almond croissants you like. Can we talk? Over coffee and pastries at my small kitchen table, Melody did something I never expected. She apologized. I've been thinking a lot about what you said last week, she began, breaking a croissant into small pieces rather than eating it. About Mom's favoritism and how it affected us. I want you to know that I see it now. I've always seen it, really, but I was afraid to acknowledge it because... She paused, searching for words. Because you benefited from it, I finished for her, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. She nodded, looking ashamed. Yes. And because I was afraid if I pointed it out, it might stop. How terrible is that? I knew it was hurting you, but I was so afraid of losing Mom's approval that I just went along with it. We were both children when the pattern was established, I said, surprising myself with the compassion in my voice. We both played the roles we were given. The difference is that my role came with constant criticism and impossible standards, while yours came with praise and support. I don't think I could have survived your role, Melody admitted. I'm not as strong as you. Every time Mom criticizes me, which isn't often, I know, I fall apart. You've been dealing with that your whole life and somehow stayed standing. That observation hit me hard. I had never thought of my ability to withstand criticism as strength. I had seen it as a necessity, a survival mechanism. But Melody was right. It had taken strength to endure, to keep trying, to build a life for myself despite the constant message that I wasn't good enough. "What happens now?" Melody asked. "Mom's been calling me daily, trying to get me to convince you to apologize. She's planning this big family dinner next weekend and wants everyone to move past this unpleasantness." "Without any acknowledgement of what caused it, I assume," I said dryly. Melody nodded. "She says you're being dramatic and holding a grudge. I'm not attending any family events until Mom acknowledges what happened and we establish clear expectations about finances beforehand," I said firmly. "That's my boundary and I'm sticking to it." "I told her I wouldn't come either if you weren't invited properly," Melody said, her voice small but determined. It was the first time I've ever really stood up to her. She didn't take it well. I reached across the table and squeezed my sister's hand. "Thank you for that. I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't," she agreed. "But it felt right. Like I was finally being a real sister to you." That conversation marked the beginning of a new relationship between Melody and me, one based on honesty rather than competition, on mutual support rather than our assigned family roles. It wasn't always smooth sailing. We had 25 years of dysfunctional patterns to unlearn, but it was real in a way our previous relationship had never been. 3 months after the birthday dinner incident, the family landscape had shifted dramatically. My mother was gradually coming to terms with my new boundaries, though not without resistance. She had tried everything in her arsenal: anger, guilt, manipulation, flying monkeys in the form of relatives, but I had remained steady. I had started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rivera, who specialized in family dynamics and helped me recognize the patterns I'd been trapped in for decades. Each session peeled back another layer of conditioning, helping me see how my need for maternal approval had shaped my choices, my relationships, and even my career. "You've been trying to earn love that should have been freely given," Dr. Rivera observed during one particularly insightful session. "That's why you chose such a practical career path, why you're so responsible with money, why you've avoided risks. You've been trying to be perfect in hopes that finally, your mother would see your worth." Those words struck a chord so deep I found myself crying in her office, grieving for the unconditional love I had never received and would likely never get from my mother. But with that grief came liberation, the understanding that I could stop trying to earn something that wasn't coming. At work, colleagues noticed a change in me. I spoke up more in meetings, proposed bolder ideas, and even applied for a leadership position I would have previously thought beyond my reach. My new confidence led to new opportunities, including heading a major campaign for our biggest client. Most surprising was my reconnection with my father's side of the family. I reached out to my paternal Aunt Susan, whom I hadn't seen in years due to my mother's subtle discouragement of those relationships after Dad died. Aunt Susan welcomed me warmly and shared stories about my father that helped me feel connected to him again. During one visit to her home, she brought out a box I had never seen before. "Your father left this for you," she explained, handling the box with reverence. "He asked me to keep it safe until you were old enough to appreciate it." With everything that happened after he passed, I never found the right moment to give it to you. Inside the box were dozens of letters my father had written to me throughout my childhood and teen years, letters he had never given me but had saved for the future. They documented his pride in my achievements, his admiration for my character, his unwavering belief in my potential. Reading them was like having conversations with him across time, each letter validating experiences my mother had dismissed or criticized. "Your mother has always struggled to see past her own expectations," he wrote in one letter dated shortly before his death. "But I see you, Abby. I see your kindness, your intelligence, your quiet strength. Never doubt your worth, even when others can't recognize it." Those letters became treasures, tangible proof that someone had truly seen me and loved me exactly as I was. They helped heal wounds I had carried for so long I'd forgotten they were there. 1 year after the infamous birthday dinner, our family gathered for Thanksgiving, but with very different dynamics than before. The dinner was held at Aunt Susan's house rather than my mother's, removing her home field advantage. I had been clear about my financial contribution beforehand, offering to bring specific dishes rather than an open-ended commitment. And most importantly, I arrived with a quiet confidence I had never possessed at previous family gatherings. My mother was present but subdued, still adjusting to the new reality where her emotional manipulation no longer worked on me. She made a few pointed comments about my hair, too casual, and my career, too ambitious, but I let them slide off me like water from a duck's back. Melody and I sat together, our relationship now strong enough to withstand the familiar gravitational pull of our mother's influence. She had begun establishing her own boundaries as well, including moving out of the apartment our mother subsidized and finding a smaller place she could afford on her own. The most unexpected development in my life was my new relationship with Michael, a kind and thoughtful architectural photographer I had met through a mutual friend. Unlike previous boyfriends who had been intimidated by my mother or drawn into her manipulation, Michael saw the dynamics clearly and supported my boundaries without trying to fight my battles for me. "Your worth isn't determined by your mother's ability to see it," he told me once, echoing what I had finally come to understand myself. As I looked around the Thanksgiving table that day, at my sister finding her own voice, at my aunt keeping my father's memory alive, at Michael's supportive presence beside me, at my mother gradually accepting the new normal, I realized how far I had come in just 1 year. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of backsliding, of wondering if standing up for myself was worth the upheaval it caused. But sitting there, able to breathe freely in my own family for perhaps the first time, I knew beyond doubt that it had been worth every difficult step. I had learned that self-worth doesn't come from external validation, not even from a mother's approval. It comes from honoring your own truth, setting healthy boundaries, and refusing to accept treatment that diminishes you. I had learned that guilt is not the same as responsibility, that I could care for my family without sacrificing my own well-being on the altar of their expectations. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a relationship is to change it, to insist on healthier patterns even when that means uncomfortable confrontations. And, perhaps most importantly, I had learned that I could break the cycle of emotional manipulation that had defined my family for generations. If I ever became a mother myself, I would know exactly what patterns not to repeat, what wounds not to inflict. My life wasn't perfect. My relationship with my mother would always be complicated. But I was finally the author of my own story rather than a secondary character in someone else's. And that made all the difference. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it meant challenging lifelong patterns? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better too. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no to treatment that diminishes your spirit. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.